Alright, so for this project, I decided to talk about Andy Goldsworthy and his art. Well, yeah, fast transition. So first things first, I wanted to talk about the nature of his art. And it's funny because his art is nature in a way. Rather than taking from nature and going into his studio to make art, or taking whatever supplies he wants into nature and building there, he instead goes around nature and finds inspiration and then builds in nature as well. And that's just a really cool thing that he does. You can see that he'll use rocks or sticks. He's got a lot of really cool ice sculptures and rock. I don't remember what they're called. I want to say obelisks, but that's not right. But anyway, so for his building process, like I said before, he uses just about only the materials he can find in nature. Occasionally, especially on projects like the one he's working on in this photo, he'll use these pin-like things that you can see at the junctures to hold together these sticks. They're not quite sticks, but they're a lot like sticks. But he'll try his hardest to not use anything unless it came from nature itself. And that's a really cool aspect of his work, because I don't think a lot of us would have the patience to go around and find every specific little leaf or properly sized twig in order to make a piece of art that might not last as long as you want it to. A lot of Andy Goldsworthy's works range in size. It's very rare that he makes super huge ones like you see down here. So sometimes you get super long logs and walls. Other times you get trees with specialized sticks, making it look like a weeping willow. But other times you just get these small little ice sculptures that he'll make out of broken icicles, or sometimes you'll get sheets of ice from a river that he'll place carefully back in the river to where the sheets are jutting out, and it makes a really cool look. So his works really do range in size depending on what inspiration he had at the time. Now, color is a very, very important thing to Goldsworthy. He's stated many a time that when he's working on his art, he isn't necessarily trying to make the colors he's using in his art follow the rules of nature. He's not trying to keep to the natural look of stuff. He's purposefully taking the colors he wants and forming them in ways he'd like, as you can see with the analogous color scheme of that top photo. He's controlled the placement of all of the leaves and how they blend together in order to make almost like a black hole, but with color in it. And this is especially cool when he applies it to other natural living things, like the image below. When you see this photo, it looks like the tree roots are glowing. It makes the tree look more alive. And so when he goes through and and specifically places colorful items for their color rather than any other way he could choose. It really makes an amazing piece of art. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the durability of his pieces. As I mentioned before, with his building, he usually will only use what he can find in nature um, to build his pieces. So as you can see up here with the leaves, there is nothing holding that together. All of those leaves are just sitting in a pond, and the only thing linking them together is the fact that they are on top of each other. But other times, he'll make more sturdy or durable things, like storm wall. I believe that's what it's called. This one down here. This was actually, he was actually paid to make this wall, and it actually used parts of an old farming wall that was previously there. But he was paid, and he had a group of people help him to make that wall. And in its entirety, there is no mortar holding anything together. They were just using properly sized stones and fitting them where they could. And this is just a really cool thing to think about, because if we were to go back to the slide with the sticks and pins, that art piece actually fell apart multiple times on Goldsworthy before he got it right, because the wind would come through and just topple everything over. And that's just the risk you take when you work in nature. Now, photography is a really big thing for Goldsworthy, because a lot of his art doesn't last all that long. A lot of his sculptures fall apart or start melting really, really quickly. And so having his camera ready to go and being in a proper setup, like having the aperture and everything set up properly, is really important. And it's just amazing what photos you can get from the same exact piece. And, a lot of what happens when he's working on nature are just happy little accidents. This image in particular, and Goldsworthy actually meant to be finished with this sculpture at least an hour before he took this photo, but because of some problems he ran into and a couple other things, he ended up having to take this photo around sunrise, which he wanted to avoid because it was starting to warm up and the sculpture was starting to melt. But because of that, he was able to take this photo how it is now, with the sun rising and illuminating that ice sculpture, which is really cool. But another thing you can see is that you have these leading lines all leading up to this corner of the photo. And that's another cool thing that he thinks about when he's taking these photos. Anyway, so that is my little blurb on Andy Goldsworthy and his art, and he's a really, really cool artist, and you should definitely check him out.